Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about why product market validation is critical to your startup success and how to do it. So you've probably heard of this number before. 90% of startups fail. Why such a big number? CB Insights recently did some research with startup founders who have had failed startups. And the top two reasons these founders cited were number one, running out of cash, and number two, not having a market need for their product. And these two are intertwined. 35% of the founders even admitted that they worked on problems that were interesting for them to solve instead of problems that served a market need. Amy is one of these founders. Amy had a vision of transforming how company boards should collaborate more effectively together. She raised friends and family round, put in some of her own money too. With the seed capital, she hired a CTO to help her build the product she had imagined. When the product launched, she convinced some of her friends to use it. And by the time I met Amy, the product's been in the market for a few years, but she just can't seem to grow her customer base. She was finally starting to think maybe it's not a sales and marketing problem, maybe it's something else. Based on our experience of working with startups with a collective exit of about $3 billion, we've seen a pretty clear trend. Startups that take the time to do validation are far more likely to succeed. Startup Genome does research on what makes ventures succeed or fail, and they have also found startups are not spending enough time validating their market, and they try to scale prematurely. It's a huge contributing factor to the 90% failure rate. So, product market validation is actually the single most important thing you can do as a founder. But what exactly is it? Product market validation is the process of determining if there's a need for your product in your target market. And you should do it before you spend capital on engineering, ideally. Because what happens when people don't do product market validation up front is they waste a year or more of their time and resources building a lot more features than people will use, or building an entire product people don't even want, like Amy. That's not the worst. Once you have a product in the market and it's not getting traction, you are then faced with challenges of having to spend more time and money figuring out why and fixing the product market fit problems. And this is all avoidable. All you needed to do is to take a few weeks up front to do some product market validation. But what if you already have a product in the market and you haven't done this process yet? Don't worry. You can use the methods that I'm covering today to diagnose and fine-tune your strategy to find product market fit. There are two simple components to this. One is to validate that there is a market, and then to validate that that market will find your specific solution valuable. Let's go over market validation. When you validate the market, it's not enough just to say that our total addressable market is women between the ages of 45 to 50. They want to get rid of wrinkles and therefore they must need my product. You need to validate what kind of women. Not every woman in their 40s are obsessed about their skin. When you build products for stereotypes, it's as effective as anything else you do based on stereotypes. You need to figure out within these demographics which customers have an acute problem. Do they see the problem? What have they done already to solve it? And what's motivating them? If you can't find motivated customers that can clearly benefit, then you have not found your market. I don't know if you guys remember Shoes of Prey. It's a luxury shoe customization startup that had shut down because their market ultimately didn't want to design and make their own shoes. They want to be inspired by what celebrities are wearing and purchase exactly those items. This is a great example of something that the founding team could have found out much easier through market validation. So how do you do that? The most cost-effective way to start is to talk to your customers. Now, as founders, you're constantly doing pitches, right? For market validation, you have to refrain from pitching or selling. Don't just walk people through your deck or your demo. Think about these customer interviews like a scientific process. In fact, most of the techniques that we use come from sociology. It's a scientific inquiry. You have a hypothesis and you're looking for data to prove or disprove it. And then you want to segment out who you're talking to. Don't just segment by demographic, segment by how people think about the problem, their mindset, their attitude, or their context. Let me give you an example. Last year, we helped a startup that focuses on heart health redesign their app. We segmented people by why they were concerned about their heart health. So we made sure that we talked with a number of people who are older than 65. We know that people with family history of heart issues could care about their heart a lot, much earlier on in life. We knew that people with heart-related health conditions like diabetes might care. And, of course, people who are diagnosed with heart issues or already have had surgery. And when we are talking to people, we keep an open mind to find out what specific needs and problems they have that hasn't been solved by another solution. So when we were doing this research, we wanted to see what common pain points people had. Now, you don't have to talk to hundreds of people. In our experience, if you're doing it as a scientific process, you can find meaningful data within about 8 to 12 interviews with the right target market. During the interview, your goal is to get data to help you make decisions. Don't pitch. Your only job is to ask the right questions and listen. Listen for things like, how do they describe the problem they're experiencing? How do they quantify the value of getting rid of the problem? Is it time, money, social status, or something else really important to them? Really get into their heads. Also, beware of selective hearing. Entrepreneurs are visionaries. Their companies are their babies. That passion helps you be successful, but that same passion can give you a tendency to have selective hearing without even knowing it. That selective hearing filters for what people say that supports your vision. So try to be objective. Don't jump into conclusions until you have collected all of your data. Maybe even have someone else who you trust who is not as invested as you to help you analyze those insights coming out of the interviews and conversations. Maybe it's an advisor who's willing to spend the time, or the most skeptical person on your team, for example. When we do this, we analyze the conversations very methodically, like you're seeing here, and turn them into data points. For instance, we tag everything and look for themes. Prioritize those themes to make sure that we are making product decisions that actually are based on data. So that heart health startup that I was talking about, we found from our research that the most acute problem across all of the different demographics was when their heart was racing really fast. They want a clear and easy method of knowing, should I call my doctor or am I okay? And that really transcended age, gender, your typical ways of segmenting. So we made the core feature really easy and simple so they can hold the product against their heart. Within seconds, they find out the results. And if they're okay, it's green. If they're not okay, it's red. And you should call your doctor. Frankly, what we found for startups that are successful is that they don't need a lot of features. They need a small set of features that solve the most acute problems really, really well. Once you've done the upfront research, you can collect quantitative data to back up what you found with surveys, paid or even unpaid media. You can collect more data to support your segmentation hypotheses. You can make sure that the way that you're positioning your product and your feature prioritization is going to work in the market. You can even test pricing strategies. Once you have confidence that there is a market looking for a solution, it's time to put your product concept to test. When you're doing product validation, you're testing the exact solution you're going to ship. Does it actually solve the problem you identified through market validation? Now, what we see sometimes is people don't stick to their MVP concepts. Creative juices get flowing, egos, inspirations can easily add features to your product, not necessarily because customers would need them. So validate your product to readjust your MVP based on the feedback. Let me walk through how to approach that. So product concept testing is not usability testing. You don't need a fully fleshed out product. Just have a simple prototype stringing together a few key screens, enough that people can understand your core product. If you have a few different product ideas or solutions, you could do a concept test to help you choose. Make sure you're only testing product concepts with people who fall into your target segments, not just friends and family. The value of this approach is, number one, a design or UX prototype can easily be produced in a fraction of the time than actually coding it. you can incorporate the feedback and make another prototype much more quickly than engineering it. For example, you can put the prototype in front of some folks. In less than a week, you can be testing an updated version. Do a post-session survey to rate the product. In a recent project I worked on, it's in the blockchain space, and the founders had a really big vision of how to use the technology to change how people pass memories down. They had a list of features that would take probably tens of millions of dollars to build, but only with $500,000 on hand at the time. So not only did we interview users, we did a pretty large quant survey with over 1,000 potential customers to help us validate the product concept. And we helped the team use data to prioritize those features. They were able to identify the early adopters with acute and urgent pain points around the problem they wanted to solve. They used the data to define an MVP that they can build with the capital that they had on hand and ready to ship it within a few months' time. Once you feel confident that your market exists and they want your product, don't stop there. Begin acquiring customers during product development to get beta testers. Remember Dropbox at the beginning? They couldn't get investors to back their idea, and so they shared the demo video on Dig and got over 70,000 people to sign up on their waiting list. In parallel with their product development efforts, the founders got feedback from customers about what really mattered to them and used their feedback to guide them to ultimately become the huge success that we know today. And even after your launch, you should keep doing product market validation, especially if you're having issues with traction still. Form hypotheses and test solutions with your customers. After Airbnb launched, the founders didn't see much growth. One hypothesis was that if the photos were less crappy, then maybe people would be more likely to rent the properties. So the founders rented a professional camera and flew to the host's house and took professional quality photos of their properties. This move was a big step that they took to become the unicorn legend they are today. So to wrap up, the most important thing you do as a founder is to make sure that you have a market for your product before spending money to build your product. Use the simple strategies that we share to gain insight from real customers. Let the market help you figure out what to build and how to sell it to them. Begin acquiring customers during your product development process and keep asking them for feedback even after launch. And remember, your market and customers are constantly changing. If your product's successful, there will be competition. And if you don't want your competition to eat your lunch, recognize your customers are the most important business asset that you have. So never stop doing product market validation to learn from them.